All right, hi. I'm Ricky from Rev Consultants. So I help subcontractors win more tenders at their target profit in 12 weeks or less, even if they're time poor, overwhelmed, and don't know where to start. So basically, my goal is to help make this process as simple and successful as possible so that you can win those bigger contracts with less stress. I try to be here on a regular basis, so jump on, ask me a question, DM anything you feel like would be good to cover. This is your opportunity to basically ask me anything. All right, so this week's topic for discussion, it's the fifth in a series of lives that I'm doing on pricing and getting pricing right, with the focus this week on risk. So to start with, what is risk and why is risk important? So basically, in simple terms, risk is anything that could change during the course of the contract that's going to cost money. So common examples are labor and material price increases, inefficient working, damage, etc. These type of things that usually do occur on a job, that's going to cost money compared to the start and the finish. So main contractors like to hold as little risk as possible. What they tend to do is they tend to transfer it down to the subcontractors. So this is called moving risk down the line. So it's really important that you know what risk you're holding in order to be able to mitigate it. At tender stage, if you've got a good handle on the risk that you're holding, you've got the option of pricing this risk in as a mitigation. So how do you know what risk you hold? So it's the contract and the contract's supporting documents like the scope of works and the pricing schedule, etc. These are the main documents that you need to understand to know what risk you're holding. So you need to understand the contract and know what you're signing up to. If you hold risk and it's likely to occur or be realized, then you really should be allowing for it within your pricing accordingly. So how do you price in risk? So there's a few ways that you price in risk. One, so program risk, which is probably the most common risk on a job for a subcontractor. This can be priced in from the program. So for example, if you're expecting the job to take 4 weeks and you price in your labor at 5 weeks, you are pricing in that element of risk. So you are allowing for risk. The second way, and the way that risk should be priced in, is pricing it in directly. So for example, if you're expecting materials to go up in price, allowing for it within the estimate. So pricing directly for that material increase. The third way, which is quick and easy, but not the preferred way, is just building a little risk pot based on the percentage of the job. So if you're unsure how to price in risk or what to include, ask yourself, what's the worst case scenario of the risk you are considering, and what's the monetary value in pounds if that happens? So if it's a pretty likely scenario, then really you should be including the cost of that risk within your estimate. Right, so let's take a little look at an example. I will pull it up. Okay, so just quickly on the first way. So in my programmed example here, I have my job priced in at 5 weeks, but I actually think that we're going to do the job in 4 weeks. So this is the first example of pricing in risk. So as you can see from my labor, I've got an allowance of 5 weeks in there of labor, but I actually think the job is going to take 4. So I've included a bit of program risk in my cost through my labor. Okay, now the second way is it's really what you're doing is building a little risk register. So this is the way that all main contractors price risk, and it's preferable because you're considering what risks the job has, and you're analyzing it and coming to a monetary value for it. So really, you're considering your risk in a much more detailed approach. So the examples of risks that I have in this example, so I've got inefficient working that might cost me £1,200. For example, as we know, I've included a little bit in the program as well, so maybe that doesn't need to be doubled up. I've got liquidated damages costing $500 a week for going over the program for 1 week. So I think I might have £500 of liquidated damages. As I'm saying, these are just examples. Material prices going up by 10%. This is a common theme at the moment with price fluctuations. I've also got in here subcontractors or missed scope. So subcontractor cost low. So maybe I have to employ a Sparky as part of the job, and I'm a little bit worried that he hasn't allowed enough. So I might include some risk, for example, or there's an element that potentially might come up, so I might include for it. Labor increases, again, similar to materials, quite common at the moment. Damage, I'm working on a contract that the subcontractor bears the risk of damage no matter whose fault it is. So that's a risk in a subcontract that I'm working on at the moment. So I've included, look, there might be potential damage there. And also in here, I've got a little bit of risk for an unknown detail. So this is my little risk register that I've built up for the job with the potential cost impact. And what I'm doing for my inclusion for risk for this job is I'm carrying forward a portion of that depending on the likelihood. So for my materials, I'm very much expecting that to go up. So I'm carrying forward the whole amount. And similarly with labor, the same. For the other items, I don't think they're as likely to occur. So I'm just carrying a proportion through. Ultimately, what I'm doing is I'm building myself a risk pot. So my risk pot that I've built for this job is £17,000. So as I was saying, this is the way that main contractors price in risk, and it's the preferable way to price in risk is to list it all out and consider what the impact might be. Right, so where we are now, where we are now in my estimate, I have my calculated risk pot there of £17,000, and I am going to include that within my estimate. So that is actually going to be included within my estimate for the likelihood that it might occur. As I kind of mentioned before, the other way to include risk is to build a risk pot based on a percentage. So I might include 5% or 5K, for example. Usually risk is generally between, the 1 to 5% or 0 to 5%, 5% being on the higher end. But as I mentioned before, it's not the preferred way because if you're not considering it, it's just a stab in the dark. Okay, lastly, as you can see here with my risk, I'm splitting the cost and they're included within my rates. So the risk is hidden within what the client sees within the rates. Okay, so that was my example of risk and pricing risk in. So I hope that was helpful. But basically, In summary, when you submit a tender, you should be clear on what risk you hold if you win the job, and you should be pricing it in if it's likely to occur. If you don't, if you hold the risk and you haven't allowed for it and it happens, what you pay for that risk, it's going to come out of your profit. So you can see why it's important to have that allowance for risk and kind of get that right. But take the time to work out what risk you're holding on every job and allow for it accordingly. This is going to ensure that you're setting up for a successful and a profitable project. Okay, that's it for today. Short and sweet. Stay tuned. I'll have another live coming up. It'll be the next in the series of pricing, and it will be on overheads, covering your overheads. If you want to speak to me about your tendering, I offer a number of free calls each month to talk specifically about how you can improve your tendering. There's a link on my LinkedIn profile if you want to book one of these. Thank you, and see you again soon.